stared at the pink slip in his hand. Again. This was the 47th time in 3 years. He should probably feel worse about it, but honestly, he was getting used to the routine by now. "We appreciate your service," said, though the crystalline alien's voice held no warmth. Couldn't feel warmth. He was made of living crystal that hummed when he talked. "However, your methods are not compatible with galactic standards." "I fixed the cooling system," said, still looking at the pink slip. "It works perfectly now." "You used parts from 3 different manufacturers," replied. The crystal surfaces of his body flickered with orange light, which had learned meant disapproval. "The manual clearly states that only certified Grade A components should be used. You installed Grade B parts, Grade C parts, and something you found in the recycling bin." "It saved the company 15,000 credits," pointed out. "That is not the point." The glow intensified. "Protocol exists for a reason. Every species in this galaxy follows protocol, every species except humans." Had heard this speech before, from his 46 previous supervisors. Humans were the problem children of the galaxy. They asked too many questions. They took breaks when they weren't scheduled. They ate food they made themselves instead of consuming standard nutrition blocks like sensible beings. Worst of all, they improvised. The galaxy ran on efficiency. Trillions of beings working together like parts in a perfect machine. Humans were the grit in the gears, the chaos in the code, the sandwich crumbs in the keyboard. Speaking of which was eating a sandwich. He'd made it this morning with actual bread, actual cheese, and some kind of vegetable spread he'd invented himself. It was delicious. Stared at it like it might explode. "You're eating again," observed. "You consumed your nutrition block only 3 hours ago." "I was hungry," said through a mouthful of sandwich. "Impossible. The nutrition block contains exactly the calories needed for a 6-hour work period." "Maybe I burn calories faster," shrugged. "Or maybe I just like eating." Made a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. Frustration, probably. "This is exactly the problem. Humans don't follow their own biology. You require 6 hours of unconsciousness per day, yet you stay awake for 16 or 17. You become hungry at random intervals. You experience unnecessary emotions. How did your species ever achieve space travel?" "We got stubborn about it," said. He finished his sandwich and started packing his belongings into a small bag. There wasn't much. After 47 jobs, he'd learned to travel light. Some tools, a spare uniform, a picture of his sister on graduation day, wearing her xenobiology research coat and looking proud. Always told him to just follow the rules. She'd adapted perfectly to galactic work culture. She had one job, worked there for 6 years, never questioned protocol. She was successful, respected. Everything wasn't. "Your final task," said, handing a data pad. "Before you leave, complete the daily maintenance check on Section 7, standard procedure." Took the pad and walked through the maintenance corridors of Station Theta 9. The station was massive, housing 50,000 beings from 200 different species. It orbited a major trade hub, which meant ships came and went constantly. Maintenance was a never-ending job. He pulled up the diagnostics for Section 7. Everything looked normal. Life support systems running at optimal efficiency. Power distribution balanced perfectly. Waste disposal operating within expected parameters. Except, frowned at the screen. There was something odd in the waste disposal readings, a tiny fluctuation in the energy signature. It was well within acceptable ranges, so the automated systems hadn't flagged it, but it was there, a pattern. He pulled up the historical data. The fluctuation had been there yesterday too, and the day before, and the day before that, for the past 3 weeks actually, getting slightly stronger each day. That was weird. Expanded the scan range and ran a deeper analysis. The energy signature didn't match anything in the galactic database. It wasn't from any of the station's systems. It wasn't radiation from the nearby star. It wasn't emissions from passing ships. It was something else. He went back to his office. The crystalline supervisor looked up from his terminal, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "I found something strange," said, showing him the data pad. "In Section 7, there's an unknown energy signature in the waste disposal system. It's been growing for weeks." Glanced at the screen for exactly 2 seconds. The readings are within acceptable parameters. The automated systems have not flagged any concerns. "I know, but look at the pattern. It's regular, like a pulse. That's not normal background noise." "If it were important, the systems would have detected it," said, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. "This is more human paranoia. You see patterns where none exist. You worry about problems that aren't problems. This is why you cannot maintain employment." "But what if—" "Your shift ended 7 minutes ago," interrupted. "Please vacate the premises. Your credentials have been deactivated." Wanted to argue more, but what was the point? He'd been fired. Again. He wasn't station personnel anymore. Was probably right anyway. The automated systems were designed by species far smarter than humans. If there was a real problem, they would have caught it. Still, as walked to the departure terminal, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He boarded a transport ship heading toward the Earth sector. The ship was small, carrying maybe 30 passengers, most of them heading home after work contracts ended. Found a seat near the window and watched station Theta 9 grow smaller as they pulled away. His communication device buzzed, a message from: "Heard you got fired again. What happened this time?" Sighed and typed back, "Fix something the wrong way." "Just follow the manual. Why is that so hard?" "The manual wanted me to waste 15,000 credits." "The manual is written by experts for a reason. You're not smarter than the entire galactic engineering community." "I never said I was smarter. I just said their solution was expensive." There was a long pause before replied. "Come visit when you get back to Earth sector. We should talk about your future. You can't keep doing this." "I know," typed, though he wasn't sure what else he could do. He'd tried following the rules. He really had. But every time he did, something in his brain started screaming that there was a better way, a cheaper way, a faster way, a more creative way. The galaxy didn't want creative. The galaxy wanted obedient. Pulled up the station data on his personal device. It was public information, available to anyone who bothered to look. Most people didn't bother. Why would they? The automated systems handled everything. But looked. He found the energy signature again, still there, still growing. He ran the pattern through every analysis program he could access. Nothing matched. It was like the signal was speaking a language no one had ever heard before. A language, thought suddenly. What if it was a language? He shook his head. That was crazy. More human paranoia, like said, seeing patterns in random noise, making up stories about nothing. Closed the data file and tried to sleep, but his mind kept returning to that strange pulse in Section 7, regular, persistent, growing stronger. Like something was trying to say hello. And no one was listening. Couldn't sleep. He tried for 3 hours, lying in his cramped passenger seat while the transport hummed through space. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that energy pattern, the regular pulse, the steady growth over 3 weeks. He sat up and pulled out his data pad again. The other passengers were either sleeping or absorbed in their own devices. No one paid attention to him as he accessed the public station feeds again. The pattern was still there, of course it was, but now started looking at other data streams. Power consumption across all station sections, atmospheric processors, gravity generators, water recycling. And there it was. The same energy signature. Tiny fluctuations in 12 different systems across the station. So small that they fell well within normal operating ranges. So small that automated monitoring would never flag them. but all of them pulsing in the exact same pattern. His heart started beating faster. This wasn't random noise. This was coordinated. Something was affecting multiple systems across the entire station, and no one had noticed because each individual fluctuation was technically acceptable. He pulled up his communication device and hesitated. Who could he call? Had already dismissed his concerns. Station security would laugh at him. His sister would tell him to stop looking for problems. But this was a problem, was certain now. He was still staring at the data when alarms started shrieking through the transport. Red emergency lights flooded the cabin. The ship lurched violently, throwing against his restraints. Other passengers woke with shouts of confusion and fear. The captain's voice crackled over the speakers. All passengers remain seated. We're receiving a distress signal from Station Theta 9. Complete power failure. All systems down. Stomach dropped. He pulled up the station feeds on his data pad, but there was nothing. Every camera, every sensor, every communication channel was dark. Station Theta 9 had gone completely silent. "Life support," someone shouted. "Unknown," the captain replied. "Emergency protocols are in effect. Galactic rescue fleets have been. Estimated arrival time is 14 hours. 14 hours. Did the math quickly in his head. Station Theta 9's backup life support could sustain 50,000 people for maybe 6 hours, 7 if they were lucky. The rescue fleets would arrive too late. Unbuckled his restraints and stumbled toward the cockpit. The transport shook again, and he grabbed a handrail to keep from falling. "Passenger, return to your seat," an automated voice announced. "I need to talk to the captain," said. The cockpit door slid open. The captain was a species that looked like a blue-gray octopus wearing a pressure suit. His name was, and his multiple eyes studied with obvious irritation. "Sit down before you hurt yourself," said. "We need to go back," said. "Absolutely not. We're heading to the nearest safe harbor. Those are the protocols. 50,000 people are going to die if we follow protocols." "The rescue fleets won't arrive in time," interrupted. "Station Theta 9's emergency life support lasts 6 hours, maybe 7. The rescue fleets are 14 hours away." His tentacles twitched. "Then there's nothing to be done. A tragedy, but we cannot help them." "I can help them," said. "I worked there, I know the systems, I know what went wrong." "You know what went wrong?" Eyes narrowed. "The station just suffered catastrophic failure across all systems simultaneously. The finest engineering minds in the galaxy will need days to diagnose that." "I already diagnosed it," said. He held up his data pad, showing the energy patterns he'd been tracking. "Something has been interfering with the station systems for 3 weeks. I reported it this morning. No one listened." Looked at the data for a long moment. His tentacles moved in patterns had learned meant he was thinking hard. "Even if you're correct," said slowly, "what can you do? The station is dead. No power, no access. The systems are locked down." "I can get inside," said. "I can manually restore power. I've done maintenance on every section of that station over the past 6 months. I know where the manual override systems are. I know which backup generators can be linked together. I know. You know how to violate safety protocols." Finished. "I've seen your employment record. Fired 47 times for creative rule breaking. Right now, rule breaking might save 50,000 lives." Another passenger appeared behind. He was human, tall and thin with tired eyes. He said. "I'm an engineer. I've worked on station infrastructure before. If this guy actually has a plan, I'll help." His tentacles rippled with what might have been frustration or respect. It was hard to tell with. "This is insane. Completely against every regulation." "Yes," agreed. "We could die. Probably. If this works, I'll be investigated for breaking protocol." "Definitely. made a gurgling sound that was probably a laugh or a curse. "I'm going to regret this." He turned to his controls and started entering commands. "Revering course. Someone tell the passengers we're attempting a rescue operation." The transport swung around, accelerating back toward the dark station, and went to the cargo hold and found emergency suits. They were standard galactic issue, designed to work for most bipedal species. "So what's your actual plan?" asked as they suited up. "The station has 3 independent backup power cores," explained. "They're in different sections, isolated from the main grid. If the main system failed, the backups should have activated automatically. But they didn't, which means something disabled them too. But if we can physically access each core and activate them manually, we can restore basic power. Not full systems, but enough for life support." "And you know how to do that?" "I've never actually done it," admitted. "But I've read the manuals, all of them, from every job I've had. I might be terrible at following procedures, but I'm great at remembering them." Laughed. "That's the most human thing I've ever heard." The transport approached the dead station. Without power, Theta 9 was just a dark shape against the stars. No lights, no energy signature, completely lifeless. Brought them alongside an emergency airlock. According to regulations, this airlock should open when it detects a ship, but if the station's dead. "There's a manual release," said. "On the outside, I'll get it." He attached a safety tether and pushed himself out of the airlock. Space was cold and silent and vast. Had done spacewalks before, but it never got less terrifying. One mistake, one torn suit, and he'd be dead in seconds. He found the manual release and cranked it. The mechanism was stiff, probably from years of never being used, but it moved. The station's airlock groaned open and pulled themselves inside. The station's interior was completely dark except for their suit lights. The temperature was already dropping. Soon it would be cold enough to kill anyone not wearing protective gear. "Backup Core 1 is this way," said, checking his mental map of the station. 3 levels down, Section 12. They moved through the corridors quickly. Had walked these paths hundreds of times, but they felt different now. Dead. Haunted. Through the walls, they could hear the sound of 50,000 people in the safe rooms, waiting for rescue that wouldn't come in time. And Les could pull this off. They reached Backup Core 1. It was a massive cylinder of machinery, dormant and cold. Opened the manual access panel and stared at the controls. "Problem," he said. "The activation sequence requires codes that I don't have anymore. My credentials were deactivated when I was fired." Looked over his shoulder. "Can you bypass it?" "If I bypass it wrong, I could overload the core and blow a hole in the station. And if you do nothing, everyone dies anyway." "Good point." Studied the system. It wasn't designed to be accessed without proper authorization, but it also wasn't designed by humans. The engineers who built it had assumed everyone would follow the rules. Never followed the rules. He pulled 3 different control panels open and started rewiring connections. This violated approximately 17 safety protocols, but the protocols assumed he cared about keeping his job. He didn't have a job anymore. "Cross your fingers," said, and activated the backup core. For a horrible moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep hum that felt in his bones, the core came to life. Lights flickered on in the corridor. Air vents started moving. "It worked," said, sounding amazed. "1 down," replied, 2 to go. Backup Core 2 was in Section 31, on the opposite side of the station, and ran through corridors that were slowly warming up as the first core pumped power through the emergency grid. People were emerging from safe rooms, confused and scared. "What happened?" a female asked, her fur standing on end with static. "Are we saved?" "Working on it," said as he ran past. "Stay in the safe areas." The second core was harder to access. The manual panel had been blocked by a maintenance cart that had shifted during the power failure, and had to move it, which was difficult in the low gravity of the emergency mode. When they finally got the panel open, saw another problem. The core's cooling system had frozen when the power died. If he activated it now without thawing the coolant lines, the whole thing would crack. "We need heat," he told, fast. Looked around the equipment room. "What about those?" He pointed to some industrial lights used for repair work. "Perfect." They positioned 6 lights around the cooling system and turned them all on maximum. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't efficient. It definitely wasn't in any manual, but it worked. The coolant slowly started flowing again. While they waited, his mind kept returning to the energy pattern he discovered, the thing that had caused all this. It was still there in the back of his thoughts, pulsing like a heartbeat. "What do you think caused the failure?" asked. "I don't know," said, "but I don't think it was an accident." "What do you mean?" Showed him the data on his pad. "I found this pattern earlier today. It was in 12 different systems across the station, growing stronger over 3 weeks. Then suddenly, everything crashes at once." Studied the readings. "That's not a malfunction pattern, that's too organized." "I know. So what is it?" "I think," said slowly, "it's a signal." Before could respond, the coolant system finished thawing, activated the second backup core. More lights came on. More systems hummed to life. The station was breathing again. Last one said, "Where?" "Section 7, replied. "The waste disposal area, where I first saw the pattern." They made their way through the station. More and more people were in the corridors now, helping each other, checking on friends. The immediate crisis was passing, but knew they weren't safe yet. 2 backup cores could sustain life support, but barely. They needed the third core to be secure. Section 7 looked normal when they arrived. The waste disposal systems were running on minimal power from the first 2 cores. Everything seemed fine. Except for the energy signature. It was stronger now, much stronger. Could see it on his scanners, pulsing through the walls like a living thing. The pattern was clearer than before. It definitely wasn't random. "Do you see that?" he asked. "Yeah, what is it?" "I have no idea." They opened the manual panel for the third core, started the activation sequence, but something strange happened. The controls responded differently than the first 2 cores. The energy pattern seemed to be interfering with the systems. "That's weird," muttered. He tried a different approach, rerouting the activation through a secondary pathway. The energy pattern shifted, changed, almost like it was responding to what he was doing. Said quietly, "I think that thing is alive." "That's impossible." "Is it? We've discovered hundreds of new life forms in the galaxy. Why not an energy-based one?" Stared at the readings. Might be right. The pattern had rhythm, complexity. It wasn't just random energy fluctuations. It was structured. It was trying to communicate. "If it's alive," said, "then the station's AI probably saw it as a threat. The systems shut down to protect themselves from an unknown entity. So we've been treating first contact like a computer virus." "Basically, yeah." The energy pattern pulsed again, stronger this time. The lights in Section 7 flickered. Could feel a strange pressure in his head, like someone was trying to talk to him but he couldn't quite hear the words. "It's trying to say something," he said. "Can you understand it?" "No, it's not using any language I recognize. It's not even using math. It's something else." Thought hard. Communication came in many forms: spoken language, written symbols, mathematical equations. The galactic species all used variations of these. Even the most alien beings communicated through logical patterns. But what if this entity didn't think logically? What if it thought in a completely different way? Humans thought differently than most galactic species. Humans used intuition, emotion, creativity. Humans made art and music and told stories. These things made no sense to species like, whose thoughts were pure crystalline logic. What if this entity was like humans? What if it communicated through feelings instead of facts? Pulled out his personal device. He scrolled through his music collection until he found what he wanted. A song his sister loved. A traditional Korean melody with a modern rhythm. It made him feel happy and sad at the same time. It reminded him of home. "What are you doing?" asked. "Something stupid," said. "Probably very stupid." He connected his device to the station's communication system and broadcast the song directly into the energy pattern. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the energy pattern exploded. Not literally, but it expanded suddenly, filling every sensor in Section 7 with light and sound and something couldn't name. The pressure in his head became overwhelming. He fell to his knees, unable to process what he was experiencing. Images flooded his mind. Not pictures but concepts, feelings, ideas without words. He saw dimensions folded on themselves. Reality bent into shapes that shouldn't exist. Darkness approaching, tearing, breaking, everything ending. He saw this entity, this being of pure energy, trying desperately to warn someone. Anyone. Screaming into the void for weeks, months, years. But no one could hear because they were all listening for the wrong kind of message. Until sent music, emotion, something that wasn't logical, something that was human. And the entity, finally, had someone who could understand. Gasped and opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor, was shaking his shoulder, looking terrified. "Are you okay? What happened?" "It talked to me," said, his voice shaking. "It's been trying to warn us. There's something coming, something that's going to destroy everything." "Destroy what?" "The station." "Not the station, everything, the whole galaxy, reality itself." Help to his feet. "That's insane." "I know how it sounds, but it's real. This entity is from another dimension. It saw what's happening to our reality and tried to warn us. But our systems couldn't understand. They thought it was a threat, so they shut down. Other species must have detected this thing. Why did it contact you?" "Because I'm human," said. "Because humans are the only species in the galaxy that think in chaos. Every other species uses pure logic. They can't process this kind of communication, but humans can." He activated the third backup core. This time he didn't fight the energy pattern. He worked with it. The core came online smoothly, and the entity's signal integrated with the station's systems instead of disrupting them. Full power returned to Station Theta 9. The lights brightened. The temperature stabilized. In the distance could hear cheering as people realized they were saved. But wasn't cheering. He was thinking about what the entity had shown him. The tears in reality, the approaching darkness, the end of everything. "We need to tell someone," he said. "The Galactic Council, scientists, anyone who will listen." "They're going to think you're crazy," warned. "I know, but we have to try." Captain's voice came through their communication devices. "Status report." "All 3 backup cores are online," replied. "Station is stable. Life support fully restored." "Outstanding work. The rescue fleets are on approach. They'll be here in 8 hours to provide additional support and investigate the failure." "We need to talk to them," said. "I need to explain what really happened." "What did happen?" Looked at the energy reading still pulsing on his scanner. "First contact." 8 hours later, the station was crowded with investigators. Engineers examined every system. Safety inspectors reviewed protocols and stood before a panel of officials trying to explain the impossible. "Let me understand this correctly," said the lead investigator, with skin like polished metal. "You claim the system failure was caused by an energy being attempting to communicate." "Yes," said. "And you established communication by broadcasting music." "Yes." "And this being warned you about reality-ending threats." "Yes." The investigator looked at his colleagues. They looked back. No one spoke for a long moment. "Mr. the investigator finally said, you saved 50,000 lives today. Your actions were heroic if highly irregular. However, your explanation for the system failure is unconventional." "I know it sounds crazy," said, "but the energy pattern is still there. You can measure it, study it, try communicating with it yourselves." "We have measured it," another investigator said. "It's an unexplained energy fluctuation, interesting but not evidence of sentient life." "Because you're only looking at it logically," insisted. "You're trying to decode it like a math problem, but it doesn't work that way. It communicates through emotion, through feeling, through methods that cannot be scientifically," the lead investigator interrupted. "Mister, I appreciate your imagination, but the Galactic Council makes decisions based on evidence, not feelings." Wanted to argue more, but he could see it was pointless. They'd already made up their minds. Crazy human, seeing patterns that weren't there, making up stories about energy beings. But knew what he'd experienced. He knew the entity was real, and he knew the warning was real too. Somewhere out there, reality was tearing apart. And he was the only one who could hear the screams. The news spread fast. "Human Save Station Theta 9 was the headline on every galactic news feed. They called a hero. They interviewed Captain and dozens of grateful survivors. His face was suddenly everywhere. But nobody wanted to hear about the entity. Nobody believed his warning about reality tearing apart. The official report listed the cause of the station failure as unknown energy anomaly, likely natural phenomenon, requires further study. Returned to Earth feeling frustrated and helpless. His sister met him at the transport station. She hugged him tightly. "You saved 50,000 people," she said. "I'm so proud of you." "Thanks," said, but his heart wasn't in it. "What's wrong? You should be celebrating. There's something bigger happening, something dangerous, and no one will listen." They went to his apartment and explained everything. The energy pattern, the communication, the warning. Listened carefully, her scientist's mind analyzing every detail. "Show me the data," she said when he finished. Pulled up everything he'd recorded. The energy readings from the station, the pattern analysis, the communication attempt. Studied it all for hours, running calculations and cross-referencing databases. "You're right," she finally said. "This isn't random. There's definitely structure here. But even if I believe you, we need more than just your word. We need proof that the Galactic Council can't ignore." "How do we get that?" Before could answer, his communication device buzzed. An incoming call from an unknown number. He accepted it, and a holographic figure appeared in the room. It was a human woman, middle-aged with sharp eyes and an official-looking uniform. "My name is, I work in the diplomatic corps. We need to talk." "About what?" "About your experience on Station Theta 9, about the entity, and about the fact that you're going to present your findings to the Galactic Council in 3 days. Blinked. "I am." "You are now. I pulled some strings. The council doesn't believe your story, but they're curious enough to give you a hearing. This is your chance to convince them." "Why are you helping me?" Smiled. "Because I've worked with aliens for 20 years and I've learned something important. Humans see things they can't. We notice patterns. We trust intuition. Most of the time, the galaxy thinks we're crazy, but sometimes we're the only ones seeing clearly." 3 days later, stood in the Grand Council chamber, facing representatives from 200 species. The room was enormous, with delegates seated in rings that rose up like an amphitheater. Felt very small. The council leader was Praxis, a being who looked like living smoke contained in a glass body. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Human, you have claimed that the Station Theta 9 incident was caused by an entity attempting to warn us of a reality-ending threat. Present your evidence." His hands shook as he activated his presentation. Images appeared in the air above him, showing the energy patterns, the communication sequence, everything he documented. 3 weeks before the incident began, I detected unusual energy signatures in 12 different station systems. The signatures were coordinated, pooling in identical patterns. This isn't how natural phenomena behave. Energy fluctuations are common, a delegate said. This proves nothing. Let him continue, Praxis said. Went on. When I broadcast a piece of music into the energy pattern, it responded, not logically but emotionally. It showed me images, concepts, a warning about dimensional rifts that are spreading through our reality. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates looked interested, most looked skeptical, a few looked openly hostile. You claim to have communicated with an unknown entity through music, Praxis said. But music is not a scientific language. How can we verify your interpretation? That's the problem, said. You can't verify it scientifically, not the way you think of science. This entity doesn't communicate through math or logic. It communicates through feeling, through intuition, through the kind of thinking that humans do naturally but most species can't process. Convenient, another delegate said. Humans are the only ones who can understand it, so we should just trust you. I know how it sounds, said, but think about human history. We've achieved things that seemed impossible. We reached space travel earlier than we should have. We solve problems in ways that don't make sense to other species. We improvise, we create. We trust our instincts even when logic says we're wrong, and sometimes we're right. A delegate stood. This is the human arrogance we've come to expect, believing you have special abilities that make you superior to species with millions more years of evolution. I'm not saying we're superior, replied. I'm saying we're different, and right now that difference matters. If I'm wrong, you've wasted a few hours listening to me. But if I'm right and you ignore this warning, everyone dies. Praxis raised a hand for silence. You mentioned dimensional rifts. Explain what you mean. Took a deep breath. This was the important part. The entity showed me that our faster-than-light travel technology is creating tears in reality. Every time a ship jumps through hyperspace, it makes a tiny rip between dimensions. One ship, one trip, it's harmless. But we have trillions of ships making billions of jumps every day. For centuries, the damage has been building up. He showed more images, trying to translate what he'd felt into something visual. The rifts are spreading, connecting. Soon they'll reach a critical point where reality itself collapses. The entity's dimension is close to ours. They saw it happening and tried to warn us, but our systems couldn't understand the warning. How long do we have? Asked from the audience. She'd been allowed to attend as a scientific consultant. 30 days, said, maybe less. The chamber exploded with noise. Delegates arguing, shouting, demanding proof. Praxis called for order, but it took several minutes for the chaos to settle. This is absurd, a delegate declared. FTL travel has been used safely for thousands of years. If it was damaging reality, we would have detected it. Would we? Challenged. What sensors do we have that measure dimensional stability? How would we even know what to look for? We've been blind to this because we assumed reality was solid and permanent. But the entity knows better. They've seen dimensions collapse before. Assuming this entity exists, Praxis said carefully, and assuming your interpretation of its message is correct, what would you have us do? Had been thinking about this for 3 days. We need to stop all FTL travel immediately. Every ship, every jump. We need to give reality time to heal while we deploy repair stations at the rift sites. The chamber fell silent. Then a delegate started laughing. Others joined in. The idea was ridiculous. Stop all FTL travel, a delegate said between laughs. The entire galactic economy depends on FTL travel. Trillions of beings rely on it for food, medicine, survival. You're asking us to shut down civilization based on feelings you got from an energy pattern. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that I'm right, said quietly. Praxis studied him for a long moment. Human, your heroism at Station Theta 9 is commendable, but the Galactic Council cannot make decisions of this magnitude based on unverifiable claims. We will assign a research team to study the energy phenomenon. If they find evidence supporting your theory, we will reconvene. Until then, this session is closed. But this session is closed. Left the chamber feeling defeated. Met him outside along with N, who had traveled to support him. They didn't listen, said. They never do, replied. Not at first, but you planted a seed. Now we need to make it grow. How? We bypass the council. We go directly to the people. Over the next week, helped create a presentation that anyone could understand. They translated the entity's warning into images, sounds, stories. They made it emotional instead of logical. They made it human. Then they broadcast it everywhere. News networks, social media, public forums, used her diplomatic connections to get the message to influential people across the galaxy. Some people laughed, some people got angry, but some people listened. Scientists started reviewing the data. Engineers began checking FTL systems for stress patterns. Civilians started asking questions. And slowly, reluctantly, the Galactic Council began to pay attention. Praxis contacted personally. Your campaign is causing considerable disruption. Ships are being delayed, trade routes are affected, people are panicking. People should panic, said. We're running out of time. The research team has found anomalies in dimensional stability near major FTL routes. Nothing conclusive, but concerning. The Council is calling an emergency session. They want to hear from the entity directly. It doesn't work like that. I can't just make it talk. Find a way, Praxis said. You have 48 hours. If you can demonstrate communication with this entity in a controlled environment, the Council will consider emergency measures. If you cannot, this matter is closed permanently. Agreed, knowing this was his only chance. He went back to Station Theta 9. The entity's energy signature was still there, pulsing quietly in the background of the station's systems. Stood in Section 7, surrounded by sensors and recording equipment, with half the Galactic Council watching remotely. Okay, he said to the empty room. I need your help. I need you to prove you're real. He broadcast music again, the same song loved. The entity responded immediately, the energy pattern swelling and shifting. But the Council scientists saw only data, energy fluctuations, nothing that proved intelligence. Make them understand, whispered to the entity. Please, show them you're real. The pressure in his head returned. The entity was trying to communicate, but it was frustrated. It didn't think like the Council did. It couldn't speak their language. Then had an idea. A crazy, desperate, probably impossible idea. Can you show them what you showed me? He asked. Can you share the vision, not just with me, with everyone? The entity pulsed, uncertain. I know it's hard, but it's the only way. Please trust me. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entity opened itself completely. Its consciousness expanded beyond Section 7, beyond the station, reaching out across space to every device broadcasting the Council session. And 200 species, for the first time in galactic history, felt what a human felt. They saw the rifts, they felt the fear. They understood the danger, not through logic or data, but through pure emotion, pure truth. When it was over, the Council chamber was silent. Praxis spoke first, his voice shaking. The emergency session begins now. We have much to discuss. The emergency session lasted 18 hours. Sat in the gallery, exhausted, watching delegates argue about how to save reality itself. Some wanted to stop all FTL travel immediately. Others said that would cause chaos and death across the galaxy. Transportation routes would collapse. Entire colonies would starve. Medical supplies wouldn't arrive in time. The cure might kill as many people as the disease. They formed committees. They requested studies. They debated protocols for gradual FTL reduction over the next 6 months. "We don't have 6 months," said Standing Up. "We have 28 days, maybe less." "And how do you know this?" a delegate challenged. "Did your entity tell you?" "Yes," said Simply. "Then let it tell us. Let it present evidence we can measure." "It already did. You felt what it showed you. That's the evidence." "Feelings are not facts, human. We need data, measurements, scientific proof." Wanted to scream. They'd seen the truth. They'd felt it in their minds and hearts. But now, hours later, they were retreating back into comfortable logic and procedures because admitting that feelings mattered terrified them. Pulled aside during a recess. "This isn't working. They're going to study this to death while reality actually dies." "What do?" "We go over their heads again, not to scientists this time, to everyone, every person in the galaxy who can feel what that entity showed them." "How?" "Join them," her data pad filled with calculations. "I've been analyzing the entity's message. It didn't just show us the problem. It showed us the solution. We need to deploy repair stations at the rift sites. But more importantly, we need everyone to stop using FTL at the same time. Let reality heal." "The Council will never agree to that," said, walking up to join them. "Then we don't ask for permission," said. "We start ourselves." Over the next 72 hours, they built a network. Humans mostly, but also members of other species who had felt the entity's message and understood the urgency. Scientists, engineers, ship captains, station managers, regular people who believed something had to be done. They called themselves the Reality Guardians, thought the name was a bit dramatic, but insisted good branding mattered. The plan was simple but massive in scope. On day 25, they would ask everyone in the galaxy to stop. Stop traveling. Stop jumping through hyperspace. Just for one day. Give reality a chance to heal while they deployed emergency repair stations at the major rift sites. "It'll never work," the Council said when they heard about the plan. "You can't coordinate trillions of beings. You have no authority. No one will listen." "Maybe," said, "but we have to try." They started broadcasting their message, not through official channels but through art, music, stories. They found human musicians and asked them to compose songs about saving reality. They found poets who wrote about the beauty of existence. They found storytellers who explained the danger in ways that touched hearts instead of minds. They didn't ask people to follow protocols. They asked them to care. Used her xenobiology expertise to help translate the message for different species. What moved a wasn't what moved a. They needed to speak to each species in their own emotional language. Organized the engineering teams building repair stations. They used human design principles, which meant the stations were weird and improvised and broke 17 different safety codes. But they worked. And slowly, impossibly, people started responding. A shipping company announced they would halt operations for one day to support the effort. Then another. Then 100 more. Ship captains pledged to dock their vessels. Station managers agreed to suspend launches. The Council watched in shock as their carefully organized galaxy started organizing itself. "This is chaos," Praxis said during another emergency session. "Yes," agreed, "but sometimes chaos is what you need." On day 25, the galaxy held its breath. Stood in Section 7 of Station Theta 9, monitoring the entity's energy signature. Across the galaxy, 73% of FTL traffic had stopped. Not perfect, but better than anyone had expected. The repair stations were deployed at the major rift sites. They weren't sophisticated. They were basically the equivalent of duct tape for reality, but the entity had said they would work if everyone helped. And that was the final piece, the impossible piece. "It's not enough," said, reading the sensors. "The rifts are still spreading. 73% reduction slowed them down but didn't stop them." "What do we need?" asked. 95%, and we need something else. The entity said we need everyone to think the same thought at the same time, a collective consciousness moment. "That's impossible. You can't make trillions of different minds think the same thing." "Not logically," agreed, "but emotionally, maybe." Contacted, "We need one more broadcast, the biggest one yet, and we need it in 2 hours." They worked frantically, pulling together every resource they had. Musicians from 100 worlds, storytellers, artists, everyone who had contributed to the Reality Guardian movement. They created something that had never existed before. A collective emotional experience designed to synchronize billions of minds across hundreds of species. It wasn't a song. It wasn't a story. It was something between them, something human in concept but universal in feeling. It expressed the simple idea: we exist, we matter, we choose to continue existing. When they broadcast it, felt the entity respond immediately. Its energy signature began to pulse in rhythm with the broadcast, and then something incredible happened. People everywhere stopped what they were doing. They felt the message. They understood it, not with their minds but with something deeper, and they chose to participate. A merchant on a distant trade station, a child in a colony school, a scientist in a deep space laboratory, a human factory worker on Earth, all of them for just a moment thinking the same thought. We exist. We matter. We choose to continue existing. The entity amplified the thought, spreading it across the galaxy faster than light could travel. Consciousness touching consciousness, species barriers dissolving. For one perfect moment, the galaxy was one mind with one purpose. And reality responded. Watched the sensors as the rifts began to close, slowly at first, then faster. The repair stations did their work, guided by the collective will of trillions of beings who chose to believe in something impossible. The entity's presence surged one final time, sending a wave of gratitude and joy that felt in every cell of his body. Then, gently, it began to withdraw back to its own dimension. Wait said, "Will we ever hear from you again?" The answer came not in words but in feeling, a promise, a connection. The barriers between dimensions were thinner now. Communication would be possible, not easy but possible. "Thank you," whispered. The entity's final message was simple: "No, thank you for listening." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened the next day. The data was undeniable. The rifts had closed. Reality was healing. The crisis was over. "I move that we officially recognize the Reality Guardian movement," Praxis said, "and that we establish new protocols for dimensional monitoring and FTL safety." The motion passed unanimously. Then Praxis turned to Human. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I apologize. We should have listened to you sooner. Your persistence and creativity saved us all. In recognition of your service, we would like to offer you a position as Chief Innovation Officer for the Galactic Council. You would be responsible for identifying problems others cannot see and developing solutions others cannot imagine." Thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No, thank you." The chamber went silent. "You're refusing?" Praxis asked, surprised. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm terrible at following procedures. I break rules, I improvise, I make messes. You saw that. You just said you valued those qualities, but within a month you'd be frustrated with me. I'd be frustrated with you, and I'd get fired for the 48th time. Then what will you do?" Smiled. "I'm starting a consulting company. Human solutions for non-human problems. We specialize in solving impossible challenges by breaking all the rules." "That's the worst business plan I've ever heard," a delegate said. "Probably," agreed, "but it's honest." was his first partner. She brought scientific expertise and could translate chaotic ideas into something other species could understand. Joined as the engineering specialist, came on as the diplomatic liaison. They set up an office on Station Theta 9, in Section 7, where the entity's faint energy signature still pulsed in the background like a distant heartbeat. Their first client was a mining company that had a problem their engineers couldn't solve. The ore extraction system kept failing in ways that made no sense. Looked at it for 15 minutes and suggested they stop trying to control the extraction process and instead work with the natural chaos of the ore deposits. The engineers thought he was insane, but they tried it anyway. It worked. Word spread. The company that solved impossible problems, the humans who thought sideways, the team that broke every rule and somehow made things better. 3 months later, sat in his office eating a sandwich he'd made himself, contacted him on the communication device. Human, the crystalline being said, his tone unreadable. I have heard of your new business. Hello, how's Station Theta 9? Functional. I am contacting you because I have a problem that our standard procedures cannot solve. I require creative thinking. Grinned, you want to hire me, the person you fired. I fired you for not following protocols, but it appears that sometimes protocols are insufficient. Are you available for consultation? What's the problem? We have an energy fluctuation in Section 12. The automated systems say it's harmless, but it reminds me of the situation in Section 7. I thought perhaps you should examine it. I'll be there tomorrow, said, and thank you for learning. Thank you, replied, for teaching us that efficiency is not the same as wisdom. Finished his sandwich and looked at the calendar. 6 months ago, he'd been the galaxy's worst worker, fired for the 47th time, considered a failure by every standard that mattered. Now he was solving problems no one else could solve, not because he'd changed, but because the galaxy had finally learned to value what made him different. His communication device buzzed, sent him a picture. It was a news article. The headline read, "Human Innovation Saves Galactic Colony from Infrastructure Collapse." Below the headline was a picture of holding a tool that definitely wasn't in any manual, grinning at the camera. Laughed and sent a message to his team. Good work, everyone, what's next? Because there would always be something next, some problem that needed human thinking, some impossible challenge that required breaking the rules. And the galaxy's worst worker, who became its most important person, was exactly the right person to handle it. Outside his window, ships began launching from Station Theta 9. Controlled FTL jumps, monitored carefully, limited to safe levels. The galaxy had learned its lesson. They still used technology. They still traveled the stars. But now they did it carefully, mindfully, with respect for the fragile reality they all shared. And in the background of everything barely detectable, the entity's energy signature pulsed. A reminder, a promise, a friend in another dimension watching over them. Raised his coffee cup in a silent toast to the impossible. Then he got back to work. Because the universe was full of impossible problems, and humans were very good at solving them.